Hi,
Hi,
how's it going? I'm Toby,
I'm Lucy.
and we are so excited to be here sharing some of our process behind the making of the album Why Am I So Single?
So much work went into sort of making this show and this album, and it was such a collaborative process. And I think often people kind of say that, but it can be a bit like unclear what exactly that means, and kind of like what stages things go through to become what you hear.
Yeah, and so we decided to break down the process of how a singular song in a musical goes from the initial idea and then develops into the stage version and then ends up as the fully fleshed out, glossy sounding thing that you hear on the album.
So we decided as a team to talk about the process of the making of the song Meat Market.
Woo! And we are so fortunate today to be joined by the co-orchestrators and music producers of Why Am I So Single, Darren and Tunde, known professionally as Future Cut, and also Joe Beighton, who was the co-orchestrator and the musical supervisor. And we're also joined by Leesa Tuley, who played the role of Nancy on the West End and on the album.
So basically, what's going to happen is we're going to talk about the sort of initial writing of it. Then we're going to hand over to Joe, who's going to talk about how it kind of went from that into sort of like the initial versions. Then we'll hand over to Future Cut, and then to Lisa, and then we'll kind of talk about how it came together for the album at the end. Um, okay, let's get
Let's get
cracking. Should we
into
talk about the
it.
writing
The
process?
writing process.
Yeah.
Woo!
So basically, obviously, when you're writing a musical, you have sort of like your ideas of which songs you are going to write. And we knew that we wanted there to be a funny dating app song in the show. We were like, well, obviously we have to do that. It's called Why Am I So Single? And like almost immediately, we were like, wouldn't it be funny if it was a sort of like who will buy kind of reference from Oliver that is like a kind of modern version of that, basically comparing the dating app space to sort of a marketplace. And I think it's funny, like I think this idea actually like long predated the whole like Oliver exclamation mark thread through the show, which is, in the show they kind of reference the musical Oliver a lot. But like I think this was just like us being like, that just feels like kind of a no-brainer for us.
Yeah, totally. And some of the early dramaturgical thinking that we had as the piece over the piece as a whole was basically like, each song in the musical, you're like watching them on the surface, like figuring out something to do as to why they're so single. But what you're actually watching is like a big step in their friendship and their relationship together as friends. And so we are kind of like Trojan horsing a story about their friendship through something that on the surface seemed like a quest to figure out why they're so single. And a huge part of, at least for us, of our friendship is like, like putting together like dating apps for yourself and with your friends and like helping your friend like curate the perfect like series of pictures and what to say to the people you're matching with and kind of like each learning about the other's experience of that respective space and seeing ultimately how they support each other through that process. And also something else we're interested in very early on was kind of like the things that like kind of like pull queer people and women together and the things that like pull them apart and separate them and show like differences because like in this friendship between like a queer person and a woman it's just like what are those like specific things that like make up those kinds of relationships and we wanted to explore that in this song too.
Mhm. So these are kind of like a sort of soup of different things that we wanted to do within it. But obviously, because it's a musical, we were like, okay, it has to further the story. And I could talk about this all day, so I'm going to try not to. But basically, the story structure of Why Am I a Single is kind of like the sort of the classic like Pixar structure, or whatever, but for both characters, where at the beginning they're living like in a way that's like opposite to the message that they need to learn. So they both think that they're tragic and single, and actually they need to learn by the end that friendship, love is as important as romantic love, that in fact they're not single. And we basically wanted to use each other's kind of like opposing, or the two characters opposing, like flaws or singular flaws in that respect to sort of push each other in the direction of learning the lesson they need to learn. Um, and so in previous drafts, this was kind of like they were going to be like, okay, we're going to tell each other why we think the other one's single, and that was the game they were playing. Whereas it ended up being like we're going to figure out why we're single together. But we thought that the dating app song would be a good place to sort of start off in a playful, like, oh, we're going to just like help each other curate the profiles. But then as they sort of go through, they start critiquing each other more and more and sort of showing like Nancy's got this sort of like hyper focus on trying to replace the love she feels she's lost because she thinks that's why she's single, and Oliver's trying to avoid engaging with people in truth because they don't believe they'll ever be loved. And so one of them's being evasive, one of them's being hyper focused, and they keep sort of pushing each other to start trying to sort of live in the way they are. And then at the end of it, it kind of like ends in a sort of moment of conflict where one of them has sort of overstepped the line. Oliver has kind of been like, well, you do this thing, which then like leads us to the next song, the next space in the musical. So that was kind of like the planning phase, was going like, okay, we need to put all these things together into a song.
Yeah. And then once we knew what we wanted the number to like achieve within like the macro story, then it got to like actually like, writing the actual thing. And the first thing we did, the first stage of that is basically planning like the order of like the sections of the song and kind of like the overall structure. And so we knew that we wanted to have an intro that was going to be like the marketplace opening, the who will buy moment of everyone kind of like selling their wares like as they do in Who Will Buy My Sweet Red Roses, like that kind of moment. And then like the first section was going to be curating each other's profiles and like what pictures the other ones should use, etc., etc., which would then basically like lead into a chorus of
There's a bee trying to get into this room right now, which is so funny for anyone who's listened to the album. Why am I so single?
that's it's kind of a trigger for
Yeah,
us.
there's a bee threatening to come
Okay,
in this room.
I think it's gone, it's gone, it's left, it's left, it's left. We're safe. Everyone okay? Okay, we're safe. Okay. So yes, so the first section is then like curating each other's profiles, which basically then will lead to like another chorus of the song, which are basically like because Oliver's Nancy's been like here are my pictures, what do you think? Oliver's like great, and Oliver's like here are my pictures, what do you think? And Nancy's like, oh, why aren't you wearing any pictures like in dresses like you usually wear? And Oliver's like, oh, well, because of this is what it's like in the meat market for me. And so Oliver shows how they kind of deal with femphobia in the kind of gay male online dating space, which would then lead to the next section of the song, looking at the matches they have. And then this would lead to a Nancy focused chorus of kind of like exposing the misogyny of like straight male dating app space. And being like, these men say these things to me and it's not very nice. But then also in a kind of weird way, showing how that might be something that like, that kind of male attention is something that Oliver might want. And maybe like there's like an envy there and Nancy kind of complaining about this thing that Oliver might want, kind of like rub salt in the wound for Oliver. And they're both doing a lot of projecting. And that's kind of what we're like showing through this. And then it goes into the kind of like dance break section, which is the swiping section of them kind of like swiping and yes to people and no to people, and then kind of like dancing with the people that they've matched with. It's kind of like big musical number-esque things. You kind of imagine that as you're listening to that dance break. And then it leads to this very fast-paced section at the end that we wanted to do, which is then like them chatting to each other about the people that they're chatting to in real time. Nancy's doing her floor of being like, oh god, yeah, like let's go for this person. This person seems great. When maybe they don't, and Oliver's doing their floor of being like, oh, this person's terrible, this person sucks. Obviously not when they seem like perfectly fine. And they're kind of like projecting what their behavior is to the other person's behavior as well. And then this basically, we knew that the next moment in the musical was going to be Nancy's big moment of her song Just in Case, where she kind of like is realizing like the feelings that she has about the ex and how she still will abandon everything for him. And so we kind of like wanted the song to end in a place that would then set up that. And so it kind of like the song would then explode with a kind of moment of Oliver like critiquing Nancy about how she's just like saying yes to anyone to try and replace the ex from her past. And so that's kind of like how the song ends in that way. So that was the kind of like structure that we knew we wanted for the whole thing as a whole, section by section.
So when we had those kind of sections, something that we do often when we're writing a song, is we write then like a bad paraphrase of what's going to be said and by whom in each section. Like, so breaking it down in terms of the musical structure of like verse, pre-chorus, chorus, but like writing like a really bad, like uglily written like synonym of like what the lyrics are going to be. So like we found this sort of example in our notes earlier of the first verse and pre-chorus. So it would be like Oliver saying,
and what I've gone for is X.
uh-huh.
And I've done this.
Okay.
And I've done this.
Great. Pre-chorus. Nancy. Okay, but have you thought about putting something more like this picture?
No, because if I do that, I won't get dates. Because do.
So it's sort of like the most boring thing you can possibly imagine, but so that we know kind of like what they're trying to say as we're trying to like dress it up with fancy kind of lyrics and stuff.
Totally. And then as we've got the kind of like lyrical map of each section,
That's it.
And then so once we've got like the lyrical map, then we start like brainstorming like different like puns and lyric ideas to do with like markets and dating, kind of like fun rhymes we might want to use. kind of like what the lyrical information might be. And then I also then start like noodling on the piano, kind of like what the musical ideas like could be for the song, kind of like that are influenced by Who Will Buy, but not breaking any copyright laws. And one thing we also did as a part of that like brainstorming lyrical creation process was like going on apps ourselves, like Hinge and Grindr and things like that, to kind of like look at what people often like say in their bios and kind of themes that come up a lot, which we could then like kind of take and poke fun at. And we also did a lot of like brainstorming of like meat and market related puns that are also like then just to do with like dating and romance and things like that. And like for example, there was one moment where we spent ages and ages trying to get this like Tinder and like organic pear idea to work. There's like 2 pages of notes on it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the lyric is like when you can't find an organic pear, you come to one that's tinned. Duh.
It's like a pear, but like a pear.
Pear.
And it's like notes and notes of that. And then eventually
Yeah.
we're like, maybe that's not
Hey,
good.
maybe if it's not happening, it's not happening. Yeah. A lot of our writing process is desperately trying to make very stupid ideas like that work
Yes.
to no avail.
And then so after that, we kind of like landed on the musical idea and the rhyme structure. And for this one, I think it's kind of often our songs are more kind of like hook led or like musically led in terms of what the sort of like structure is going to be and how we're going to fit the story around it. But this one was very much like lyric and structure led, and the music was really about like pastiching very directly that what Who Will Buy kind of idea, as opposed to trying to like make the music itself like you know, catchy as the first thing that we think about, which is a bit of a different thing for us in
Yeah,
this song.
yeah. And then the kind of final section of writing is then putting like these lyrical ideas and these musical ideas together, just like putting it all together. It's like fitting our lyrical ideas into like what the melodic structure we've decided on is,
And what the
um,
paraphrase was that
and
we
what the
did.
paraphrase was, and kind of like section structure is as well. And a kind of an example of how like that bit happens is like we knew that like before we go into chorus three, or when like the boys are singing to Nancy on like the straight male app space, there's going to be this little melody of bum 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 ba da bum 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 ba da bum bum, and so that would be a boy's line of like something one of them might say or all of them might say, and then Nancy's response to that of like, okay, so if things like that is why I don't have a
I
good
don't
time
want to go
on
out
the
with me.
ads.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some like auditioned versions of that are send pics of you topless.
That's why I don't shop at the
Come suck on my figs.
see they're all pigs at the
Send me pics of your rap.
that's why I don't swipe back at the
Show us your
you
fearless.
see it's not Brill, it's the
And then we ended up not using any of those randomly for some crazy reason. And we ended up going for send pics of your melons.
that's right, it's pure hell inside the
Boom. Yeah.
market.
Actually, there was a version that was that's right. That's
It's all
right. It's all hell in there. And then we're like, oh, that's not quite right with melons. Can we
yeah.
add like an S to the
Instead.
end of ins in some ways so that we did the inside, well, whatever.
Yeah.
And then once we'd done like things like that, basically for every section of the whole entire song, we had finished our first draft.
And so then from that first draft, we had a kind of workshop process where we had a bunch of actors for, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks. Oh no, it was longer than that, 5 weeks. Basically putting a draft of the kind of staging of the show up with the various creative team members, one of whom was Joe Beighton. And I'm going to hand over now to Joe to talk about his steps in taking this from the sort of piano vocal version that we provided into its next iteration. Over to you, Joe.
Hello, hello. Yeah, I think that there are kind of three main stages of going from what Toby and Lucy provide, which is essentially a kind of piano plus a sort of top line melody. I mean, they provide a lot more than that in terms of like references and ideas about like they have a very clear idea usually about like what they want the kind of fundamental groove of the song to be, and also what the sound of the orchestration needs to be. And so I guess the process is the initial process is really me taking that like piano and top line and then working with them to figure out like how to make it sound like the actual show. And there's kind of three stages. There's the kind of initial vocal arrangement stage. Then there's the kind of first part of the orchestration stage, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. And then there's the second part of the orchestration stage, which is kind of giving it its final form, which I'm going to pass over to Future Cut to talk about in a minute. So the first stage, I get that kind of piano and top line from Toby and Lucy. We did, before we did that workshop that Lucy was just talking about, we did a few weeks with some students at Lambda, I think it was back in 2021. And this was the kind of first stage of fleshing out the ensemble vocals. And I think for this, the key thing was about using that "Who Will Buy" Oliver reference. There's a lot of the vocal arrangements throughout the show, because there's a lot of pop reference, are a lot more kind of tight and close harmony and clashy, and generally kind of mid-range in terms of vocals. Tenor bass types are generally singing on the higher side. Mezzo, soprano, altos are singing on the lower side. So we're kind of sitting in that mid-belty range. Whereas with a lot of Oliver and a lot of the kind of classic musical theatre from that era, the arrangements are a lot wider. So if you think about "Who Will Buy," you can hear in your head all those Strawberry Sellers and Knife Grinders, if they're sopranos, singing very much at the top of their range in a kind of legit style, and the Knife Grinder being a very low bass. So I'm going to share my screen and just show you a little bit what that looks like. Okay, so this is the score from that Lambda workshop that we did. So it's the very first version really of fleshing out, and you can see here, this is the end of the song, the big finish, that we've got on that very final phrase, some very low notes for the kind of bass range people, and we're going up to a top G here for for the sopranos essentially. And yeah, it's a much wider arrangement than we're doing throughout most of the show. And it allows, we did a big vibrato on that bar 194 at the end there, just to really kind of sit in that style. And actually, if you have a look at the beginning of the song, which is a kind of the equivalent section of the the ripe strawberries ripe and the knives to grind stuff, you've got all these different characters coming in and overlapping each other. And you can see here again, high range for people, or very low range here. I don't think those bottom Cs actually ever came to pass, because I think that probably Toby Marlow is the only person in the world who is actually able to sing those kind of notes. Which actually sort of brings me on to another part of the kind of vocal arranging process, which is Toby and Lucy have these sort of incredible ranges, and between them can sing literally all sorts of notes. And we kind of had a bit of a process, especially when we did the show with Joe and Leesa, where we went through the score and kind of, I was doing a bit of, let's have a little bit of realism about what's singable here. And we kind of went through a process all together with Joe and Leesa as well, to be is this kind of sustainable for an 8-show week? So we were quite involved together in that process. Okay, then I think that's basically the vocal arrangements version. And that version that we did at Lambda was really just piano and vocals essentially, and it was really useful to just kind of strip everything back and be what is the raw singing that's happening here. The next stage was to start, for our Sadler's Wells workshop, was to kind of start expanding out that a little bit in a way. And Toby, Lucy and I talked about, instead of going kind of fully for a massive orchestration process, which was always going to be a really big task for this, because we were going to try and make it sound really musical theatre-y and really sitting in all the musical theatre references, but also with lots of pop production as well, to kind of set it in the kind of contemporary setting. We thought that the best thing for our first step would be to kind of iron out what the kind of fundamental grooves are. So here's the score from the Sadler's Wells version. You can see here we've got all the vocal stuff. Violin is there, but actually we weren't using violin at this stage. So we've got keyboard MD, we had one guitar, we had bass, and we've got drums, and you can see the sort of original piano vocal line down there. So it's basically a 4-piece band to really figure out what are like the fundamental grooves of these songs, and that is bass, to obviously like ground it all in the bass, drums, which I think would, in a way, the most important part of this process, because having a piano doesn't necessarily show you exactly what the drums need to be. Quite a lot of that process of figuring out what the drum grooves were is like voice notes from Toby and Lucy to me of beatboxing, essentially being like, we think it sounds kind of like this, and then I then go through a process of trying to interpret what that beatboxing is, like what's a kick, what's a hi-hat, and then I usually I then make demos on Logic to show them and see if it works. And then I guess the piano and the guitar are there to kind of start to explore a little bit about like what the sounds might be, but staying away from doing too much programming and being too specific about the sounds, like staying on a piano sound throughout the whole version, so that when we don't feel like we're kind of making a half-hearted version of like the full orchestration. So some examples, maybe let me show you like this stuff here, right? This is the kind of cha groove, which is like really fundamental to the like Who Will Buy Oliver vibes. And yeah, it was like you can see in the drum part there that it's like obviously such a fundamental part of the whole thing. And there it's fleshed out from in the chorus, from just like kick and hi-hat to snares as well. And this is the section that would eventually become our kind of Berghain, big clubby drum and bassy kind of section. And so, yeah, it's just kind of like the first step in the direction of that. So the kick is just a standard kick drum, and it would eventually become a very specific reference of a kick drum. But like this was the stage where we were just figuring out what is the kick drums, like what does it literally play. Let me see, there's another couple of examples here, like, let's see. Okay, so like we had, with our drum kit, we had a little triangle, the piano's doing like a kind of thing. That would eventually become like glockenspiels and phone sounds, which Darren and Tunde will talk about a bit later. We've got this like classical kind of figure in 114, which I'm not even going to try and play because I'm just going to murder it. But that ended up becoming a kind of harpsichord figure, and I think at the stage that we did it, we kind of knew that it would eventually be that, and I think you can when you hear it, you can kind of tell that's what it's calling for. So it's about sort of doing an impression of what the final orchestration might be. This bit at 120, Pirates of the Caribbean was the sort of main reference for this. That would eventually become like a strings figure, but I think like on the piano you can still get a sense of what the vibe is. So it's kind of like, so we know that those lower notes are going to be like cellos and basses. Yeah, I think that's the general gist of what that part of the process was. And so we kind of went away from our Sadler's Wells and Lambda workshops knowing really what we wanted the vocals to do and what we wanted the fundamental grooves to be. And then the next stage was when we started working with Future Cut to essentially add several more instruments, strings and like brass and reeds, and also a load of pop production to really start to create the actual sound world rather than just the pure kind of groove world. So I'm going to hand back to Toby and Lucy very quickly to introduce them, I think.
Yeah. And also, yeah, apologies again, Joe, from us for sending you unsingable melodies and hours of beatboxing into a phone for you to figure out.
It's my joy.
It's really amazing and such a testament to the genius of Joe Beighton that like all that like crap that we just like send his way then becomes these like beautiful scores. And so thank you again for your amazing work.
So then after the workshop, we did a couple of like little lyric tweaks, and then we kind of went into the full production process for the West End and for this album. So we're going to hand over to Darren and Tunde now to talk you through the music production.
Hey. Hi, how's it going? I'm Darren Tunde. We're Future Cut. And so we met Toby and Lucy. And I suppose there was a couple of processes, really. The first thing really was just understanding concepts, because obviously our job was to realise those rhythm section demos, essentially, that Joe had worked on, and then see it through and realise that for the stage. So initially there was some conversations with regards to concepts. I'm going to share my screen here, and let's see if this works. So yeah, as you can probably see, this is our arrangement page. This is a piece of software called Ableton. I'll get into that in a second, but initially this was a Spotify playlist that Toby and Lucy sent us with some ideas of the sonic palette that they wanted to use for the final production. So you can see there's the Oliver stuff and some Jack Sparrow stuff.
Hans Zimmer.
Hans Zimmer stuff. And so we just had a lot of just chats, just really understanding exactly where everyone's heads were at before we really got into the process of sort of the orchestration and production for the stage. So yeah, moving back onto Ableton here, which is the piece of software we used. I'll just talk you through roughly, just so you understand the bearings of what you're actually seeing there. So at the top here, you can see there's time signature stuff. So you can see there's several time signature changes in the piece, which obviously complicates things. Thank you very much for that. And then here at the bottom, I'll show you. Oh, it doesn't want to click. Hold on 1 second. There we go. You'll see these squiggly red lines here indicate tempo changes. So again, there's quite a lot of tempo stuff going on here, which is not uncommon for musicals. And so all this sort of stuff is we kind of have to get in first to make sure that everything's kind of happening and doing the right things. And then these blocks here just indicate groups of sounds, and we've put them into sort of a like sounding instrument, so that it's just easier to navigate. So drums, bass, keyboards, and so on. So I'll just go into a bit of what we actually had going on here. Tunde, do you want to just sort of talk through the drums?
Yeah, I mean, Darren was saying we had a conversation with Toby and Lucy, but basically what they wanted at the time, I was like, I'm not sure if this is achievable, but they pushed us, and we sort of got our heads around it. He wanted it to sound traditional, but also sound of the time of 2024, 2025, which I think's at the time it was quite difficult to get that and understand what they meant until they were explaining, like, we want phone sounds to be percussion, we want the Hans Zimmer sounds in there, we want Oliver in there, and we want it to be also bits of techno, German dance music as well, but to all be cohesive. So that was a challenge. That was a fun bit as well, to try and sort of realise that. So with the drums here, we have a good job playing.
So there's different layers making up what you eventually hear as the drums. So it's kind of quiet, but
yeah. So that'd be more the sort of Hans Zimmer, Pirates of the Caribbean vibes. And if you played a bit earlier on,
let me just go through that bit. The char section, as Joe called it. Then the next layer for that, on top of that, would be sort of more electronic drums. So that's kind of bringing the pop element into it. And then below that, we've got just some snare layers. And then this is the bit you love most. Yeah.
This is the sort of German techno section.
And so altogether, what you'd actually end up hearing is this kind of thing, which is a combination of the live and the electronic stuff. So you get the idea of how these things kind of build up bass would be a very similar thing. There's different layers of bass, sometimes playing together, sometimes individually.
And I suppose all sort of working independently to give sections just different textures and moods as we sort of go through the song.
Yeah, there was some, because of the references, there were some interesting instrument choices. Bandoneon, which is kind of like a weird accordion type thing. And this was present throughout. As well as the piano. And we were very specific about the specific types. It's easy just to say piano, but actually there's 50 different types of pianos in terms of the sounds that they make and the style that they're kind of used to playing. So this is what's called a tack piano. So it's got little hard tacks on the strings, gives it a little bit more of a spiky sound when you hear it. Kind of, you used to find those in pubs back in the day.
I think this was probably the thing with all five of us sat down and just it's the choices they made, like what piano was going to work with what sound, with what drums, with how you're going to mix the traditional with the modern. I think that was probably the thing that took the most time, just sitting down, listening, and getting the right choices.
Yeah, it was definitely a tonal thing, and in all honesty, we didn't always get it right. This one was one of those where we maybe went for a bit more of a traditional approach initially, and then had to sort of pare it back, just to find that right balance between modern and contemporary. So you got guitars, strings. So this would be the from Joe's original sort of orchestrations. Building it up into full sections, and then I'm going to sort of zip down and go to this thing called effects group, and this was probably one of the most characterful parts of the whole process. So, given the theme of the song and the subject matter, the idea came up to try and use phone sounds as part of the orchestration. So there was like a lengthy process of sampling pretty much every phone sound we could think of, from message alert, email sending, email receiving, grinder effects, like everything.
Right.
And then once we had them in the computer, we sort of loaded them up onto a keyboard so we could trigger each sound. We then had to tune each sound to the song. And then it was a case of going through each one and sort of finding appropriate sections to use those sounds. So, for instance, let me see if I can find where's the here you've got this the kind of whoosh sound.
Do you want to play it with a full track as well?
Yeah, I'll do that in a second. You've got phone. The camera phone. And then see if I can find something that's here. These are the phone taps. A lock screen. And so we kind of built this whole thing up and eventually ended up with something a bit like this. And so on and so forth. And then in the final track, what it sounded like was this. Which I'm pretty sure has never been done before in the West End, because it was really amazing, like kind of painstaking to do it, but it when it actually went on stage, it was really incredible to see.
I think what was really interesting is Toby and Lucy's vision was obviously they could see it as well. So even though we were orchestrating the music and producing the music, their vision of how they wanted to see it on stage was really interesting to sort of get behind that and try and get in their heads and see their vision.
Yeah, and so then that was kind of the first stage of it, and then the second stage really was to then, we had no holds barred in terms of what the ideas would be at this point, and then at this point we then had to figure out how to get what was on this screen and make it playable on a stage. So that was kind of another process of a lot of programming, a lot of Joe again having to kind of sort of almost reorchestrate what we had here and put it into sort of manuscript form for some of the players, because there was some stuff being played fully live, for instance strings and horns, and then with stuff like drums we had electronic drums triggering some of these sounds, and they could change what sounds they were playing bar by bar, if anything, and certainly song by song. And the same applied with some of the bass sounds that you're hearing on the stage and the keyboard sound. So it was a pretty sort of lengthy process and quite complex amount of programming. And then what actually ended up on stage was really a hybrid of kind of what you're hearing there. And I think that's kind of it really at this particular point. But I think at this stage we'll hand back to Toby and Lucy. I think is going to introduce Leesa.
Oh, thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Oh my God, sorry.
Yeah.
We're so annoying.
It's
Very
so
annoying.
it's so cool to like hear those sessions like bit by bit and all those like phone sounds and like how they like pitched them all. It was so clever.
Totally. And I feel like when you first played it to us, and also when it was like in the show, like I kept getting that like twitchy feeling of wanting to check my phone when you hear those sounds, and that's like, and I think that's kind of a cool like dramaturgical thing of that sort of like addictiveness of the apps and being on your phone and stuff. Anyway. So we're going to hand over now to Leesa, who's going to talk about the process of learning it and rehearsing it and getting it on stage. Hi, Leesa.
I wish I had my camera on when Darren and Tunde were talking about all the things and all the layers, because I was singing over that every single night and was unaware of half of those sounds going on. It's amazing. So I'm going to talk about the kind of vocal side of things and rehearsing the song. And I remember first hearing the song and my first impression being, oh, just when I thought this score couldn't get any harder, Meat Market came along, and the complexities were reflected in the vocals just as much as they were in the music, and the first thing that stood out to me was the fact that obviously it's quite a kind of patter song, so it's a lot of words, a lot of information that is delivered very quickly, and one of the biggest challenges for me and for Joe was that we both have quite strong accents, so articulating for us at the best of times is quite challenging. So, being able to do it quickly and to deliver the story well, still in our accents, but in a way that could be understood was like the first kind of major difficult kind of thing to tackle, because on top of the words being so wordy, they were set to like really intricate melodies, as you've seen, and I know Joe Beighton can vouch for me here. There was a couple that were so intricate and patterned that I had to practice them till I was blue in the face to get them bang on, because it was so precisely thought out that yes, it was really quick, but everything was to a very specific tune. So it was like an absolute masterclass in singing. And on top of that, obviously, as the whole score was for Nancy, the most challenging thing being the range of what Nancy sings, and also the difference in styles that Nancy sings. And Meat Market's a really good example of that, because, with the kind of spoken sound and kind of speech quality that the majority of the song is, Nancy bursts out into a couple of like operatic soprano outbursts, which I'm sure you'll hear when we listen to the song. I'm not going to demonstrate them live. But there was a couple of times where I was just at the absolute top of my range in a complete different style out of absolutely nowhere. And so I think in Meat Market, but also in the entire show, I found it really interesting because it changed my approach to how I would warm up for the show and how I would prepare, because if you were singing a legit show, you might warm up in a specific way, trying to get your larynx into a specific place. Same for if you were in a pop show and you were more warming up like riffing and belting and stuff like that. This show covered absolutely all bases. So, in order to prepare for this show, I just had to try and warm up generally and be kind of ready and flexible for all of the different styles that happen in the show. Because I think one of the songs shortly before Meat Market, we're singing like an actual rock song. Don't know why I'm doing that. But like that's the same for Meat Market, like the absolute change of styles within about half an hour and throughout the show is probably one of the most challenging things ever. And that was the vocals on their own, and that was before I saw the staging, which was as Toby and Lucy explained about it being this kind of concept of Nancy and Oliver shopping for a partner, that we kind of we imagined that on the stage with actual life-size shopping trolleys. So you can imagine us pushing ensemble members around, sat in the trolleys whilst singing these intricate melodies, trying to spit out all of these words and sing soprano was probably one of the most challenging numbers I have ever performed and learned in my career. But it took a lot of work, a lot of practice. It was really difficult in the rehearsal process. I think at one point I never wanted to see a shopping trolley ever again. But because of that, the payoff was just incredible. The audience received it well every single night. The kind of shock factor of it all, the spectacle of it all, with obviously, as you heard, the kind of orchestration, the big grand backing that we had with the visual. It paid off so well, but it was so so difficult. And also like on the flip of that, we then obviously recorded the album, which was completely different again. There was absolutely no hiding with the articulation and the melodies there. That's where we ironed out a lot of my mumbling, was in the recording process, which was completely different again. And I think Toby and Lucy are gonna speak more on that. If that
Yes, thank you so much, Lisa. And once again, we're so sorry. The trolleys, yeah, honestly. It was like the thing where it's like, oh, so you want me to really enunciate whilst being terrified that I'm gonna fling Josh off the edge of the stage in a trolley. Cool, 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 cool. But also, as you said, the payoff was spectacular.
But those rehearsals were big week.
Yeah,
It's big week.
big week.
Big week.
Um,
And basically speaking of rehearsals then in terms of like back to the writing of it, then what happened kind of like during the rehearsals for the Garrick production, and also during tech and during previews, like little things change in the song as well as things were revealed. For example, like the length of the dance break changed because of like logistics with trolleys. And then also we added a playoff at the end of the number to kind of get the trolleys off, which Joe Beighton arranged and put together, which was like the same thing but like a tone higher. And then we also did the final
Yeah.
rewrite.
And I thought there's kind of an interesting thread through through this, which is that like Meat Market lyrically didn't change a whole lot, or even musically from the very first draft, but the things that did change throughout were always linked back to a structural thing that we had, which was in Nancy's arc, when in the second act she sings Lost, which is basically about her relationship to grief and her relationship with her father. Basically it kind of kept feeling like we'd forgotten that she had like a dead dad and like whatever. And so it kind of kept feeling like, surprise, this is the secret answer. And we were like, okay, we need to sort of thread her sort of relationship to mental health, and kind of remind the audience of the sort of like of the sort of dad's existence, so that when it kind of comes up, it feels like we've like laid the kind of like the what's like the sort of the little crumbs, the Hansel and Gretel crumbs, to sort of find the sort of answer. Anyway, and we also at the same time had this terrible lyric in from the very beginning, which we made Jemima sing over and over again for like in the workshop and in this. So it was just, sorry, Jemima, sorry everyone. And it went like, do you want to do it?
Oh yeah, so it was kind of like it was during the like in the 6/8 chorus where like and Nancy's interacting with like the straight boys on the app, and one of the boys goes, "I'm the joker of the pack in my group."
Okay, whacking.
The joke being Joaquin Phoenix, who plays the Joker,
Joker.
and she's trying to do a joke, and there's like a silence, and to show that like
Yeah.
boys don't like it when girls are funny all the time.
Based on the experience of whenever anybody would make a sort of joke at me on an app, I would like make a joke back and then be completely ghosted and be like, cool.
And then, as various people kind of pointed out throughout the various processes, like, his name is Joaquin, and so
Like,
Joaquin doesn't rhyme with Paquin,
and it was like
Paquin, like, yeah.
always
So,
violence. But then on the, I think it was the last ever rehearsal and the last preview that we were changing stuff on. We finally managed to get in the lyric change. Oh no, it was like in the last week. But anyway, it was a kind of lyric change that both solved that terrible joke, but also reminded us of the sort of like Nancy dad thread, so that Lost felt really earned when it arrived in the second act, which was the I'm the kind of guy I'm sure your dad would adore.
well, he's not around anymore.
Daddy issues.
Score!
And we were very pleased with ourselves for like wrapping up. It felt like really tying up the end of the bow. We know that we. Oh, sorry.
And RIP to
R.I.P. to Wacken.
yeah.
So we're kind of running a bit low on time, so we're just going to sort of like give you sort of the headlines of the next kind of process. So as Leesa said, we recorded all the vocals actually in a little booth that we built. We didn't build, but Sam Featherstone did in the Garrick itself. So we had the cast coming in whilst the show was running, doing a couple of hours here and there. We'd occasionally swing. Joe would swing off sometimes so that they could do a big day of singing. And then at the same time, we had Joe and Future Cut were recording all the live instruments. So they'd obviously made all these sort of like production tracks before, transposed them into live recordings, and then into sort of live instruments, and then getting the live instruments recorded back again.
Yeah. And then when all the vocals are recorded, you basically do a process called comping, which is basically like putting a compilation together of like little bits from different takes to kind of like the ideal like stream of vocal performance. And usually like that process is us like sitting behind Sam Featherstone, who engineered the vocals, kind of, oh, actually, can we have a bit from that take and a bit from that take? But because we were kind of under time pressure, as per usual, to get the album out, he kind of taught us how to do it. So then we just sat on a laptop for ages being like, okay, but that bit of that syllable from that take, then the end of the word from that take, and putting that together.
It'd be like, oh, I love the way that Lisa sang that note. Oh, but I really like the sort of the end of that sentence, the like, enunciation on this, or the attitude in this thing. So you kind of put together like Frankenstein of vocal that.
Totally. And then we did some recording of pickups, which are basically like any bits that you didn't quite get in the booth. You get the actors come back in, and then they like sing them again and get it exactly right. And then there was the mixing process with Sam Featherstone, and also with like with Future Cut and Joe as well, of basically like getting all the different instruments and track sounds to like sound exactly how we want them, and to balance them exactly how we want them to be in the mix, so that like the vocal is always very clear, but also like you get like the different like moods and fields and textures that you want across the album as a whole. And then when the tracks are perfectly mixed, they're sent off to mastering, which is then when they do like very clever stuff that I to this day don't understand, to do with like EQing and things, just to make sure that like the album the songs are like the right volume and sound good on like any headphone or speaker across the world forever. And then we put it out in the world. And hello, Spotify.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like in a nutshell, a giant nutshell, the kind of process that we went through. And we thought it'd be fun to finish off. I think we're going to hand back to Darren and Tunde. We're going to play through the whole thing and I think watch along with the session as well, just so you can kind of see how it all came together in the end. So over to you guys.
Hey, okay, so I'm going to share our screen again. There we go. And yeah, here it is, the final version of Meat Market.
Good food, good coffee, great conversation. I'm into good food, good coffee, great conversation. I'm into good
South
food,
London,
good
corn
coffee,
and bread.
great
South London,
conversation. I'm into good
South
food,
London,
good
corn
coffee,
and bread.
great
South London,
conversation. I'm into good food,
South London,
5-9,
corn and bread.
5-10,
great
South
conversation.
if it's important.
South London,
5-9,
corn and bread.
5-10,
South
Good
Sorry about
5-10,
to the meat market.
Is anyone buying a quality guy in the market today?
Meat market.
I'm tasty and tender, a verified vendor, so come and say hey.
Meat market.
So you're shopping local, well I'm a rep bloke, I live 1 mile away.
Meat market. I'm good enough to eat, so I know I can meet somebody at the meat market.
Now then, tell me what you think of my display.
Well, okay.
A picture of me working out to show me at my best.
Incred.
A picture of me laughing so they don't know I'm depressed.
I'm
Then
dead.
3 of me confirming that I'm hot, and then a meme from Gilmore Girls.
Okay, you're perfect. I got cope. I'm gonna scream.
You go.
So here I've gone for hunky, sexy, sturbly dude. Then 4 more just the same.
Whoa.
Yeah, that last one's a nude.
Okay, they're great, but not really you. Why not add some pics and dresses?
What?
Just 1 or 2.
Show the man authentic me. You've clearly not frequented the
Meat market.
I'm looking to find a sausage to grind, a banger that's not too bent.
Meat market.
No fats and no femboys. This is a new them boys. I just want a normal gent.
Meat market.
Is that nail varnish? Sauce not into garnish, cause I'm 100%
Mass for mass.
and I don't like to eat meat without any meat when I'm shopping at the meat market.
Yikes. Well, why don't we have a look and see how we're selling? Any likes?
yeah, one boy like me. How about you?
Oh, it sucks. Everyone's a pig.
Let's see. Oh my gosh, hundreds of people have liked you. Come on, take this little piggy to market with you.
All right then, babe.
What about him?
No.
Him?
No.
Oh my gosh, him.
Ew.
Oh, come on, Nancy, just match with a few of these guys. They're so hot.
Trust me, they're not.
Go on.
Fine. Hey.
They're replying, yay!
Send pics of your melons.
That's right, it's pure hell inside the
Meat market.
great bod, great face. Wanna come to my place?
No.
Good, cause you're a slut.
Meat market.
Have you tried reading Nietzsche? Maybe I could teach ya. I have a philosophy degree.
Meat market.
I'm the kind of guy I'm sure your dad would adore. Well, he's not around anymore. Daddy issues?
Score! Meat market. Oh, the dread is existential, but the shopping is essential. Though it's rotten and it's gross, so we've got to do our groceries at the meat market.
Let's see who you're chatting to.
This guy.
Show me a goodies.
What? I think he's pretty funny.
Oh, and I hate to say it, but he's not.
Okay, you're right, but he's pretty hot.
He's not as hot as you.
That's true, but what have I got to lose?
He's such a snooze.
Okay, well, what about you?
Mine's boring and basic as well.
Oh no, that sucks, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's all like, ooh, where did you grow up? And I'm like, ooh, spare me.
Wait, he's only making conversation.
One that's really boring.
Oliver, give him a chance.
Oh no, why should I be snoring when I'd rather dance?
He's into you and he seems great. Why not just ask him on a date? I know you're scared, but if you ask it, you might not leave with an empty basket.
Yeah, I'll go for someone who deep down I know I'm not into. Then moan about it when it's done. Does that remind you of someone?
Meat market. We gotta make a sale. We gotta start a party before we oversell. Before we always party here at the meat market. Meat market.
Yay! Oh, it's so funny to listen back to it and just to think about all of the culmination of everybody's sort of work that went into that.
Yeah.
It sound awesome.
For a song that is essentially very, very silly.
Silly little joke. We were just saying that one of our favorite lyrics in the whole of the show is the
Yeah. And though it's rotten and it's grosser, we gotta do a groceries at.
yeah. We're like, it feels like a nice kind of like place where all of the different ideas came together.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and listening to this, and thank you so much to Future Cut and to Joe and to Leesa for being here and explaining all of the stuff behind the scenes. We hope you enjoyed it. And
thank you, Impact 24, for hosting this.
Thank you.
So much fun.
Everyone go listen to the album.
Yes, please do.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.